Footprints Without Feet, written by Haji Wells. Now let's see the introduction of the lesson. Can a man become invisible? This is the story of a scientist who discovers how to make himself invisible. Does he use or misuse his discovery? Okay, it's about that. It's going to give answer about those questions which are asked. The story is about a scientist named Griffin. He discovers the rare chemical which can make the man invisible, but at the same time, the man can be touched and felt physically. Let's read and find out how he uses or misuses his power his own. Okay, today we are going to see about that only. The story is about a scientist named Griffin. He had been discovering ways which could make a man invisible and finally swallowed certain rare drugs that made him invisible. He was first noticed by two boys in staircase of the house where they could just see him footsteps and started following it. They followed until the footsteps are fainter and cannot be seen. First, as he is feeling cold, he enters a small town down. He decided to wear some warm clothes and eat something. His first unboxes a new clothes and wears them. Then from the kitchen of the restaurant, he eats cold meat and some coffee. Later he goes to grocery store and eats sweets and drinks wine. He then falls asleep on a pile of clothes. He then wakes up in the morning when some of the store assistants had seen him and started chasing him. He quickly threw away all the clothes he was wearing and became invisible again. Then he started roaming around again without any clothes in the cold winter of London. He then decides to steal clothes from a theatre company as he knew he would get something there to cover his face as well. He then steals bandages for his face, dark glasses, false nose, and hat for covering himself. He then hits the shopkeeper and steals all his money. Soon he realized that London is too crowded to live like this and decided that he would go to a remote village. He books 2 rooms at an inn at Epping village. He reaches there, and it is strange for the people of Epping that stranger with such a weird appearance has come to stay at an inn during the winter season. Once his money is over, he steals from the people and also hits the landlord and his wife when they try to check his room in his absence. Then the village constable is asked help, but before that Mrs. Cole, the wife of the landlord, was in questions regarding who he is and what he did to her furniture. This makes him really furious, and he decides to show her who he really is. The people then see a headless man, and Mr. Jaffer, the constable, also finds out that he would have to arrest a man who does not have a head. They are unable to catch Griffin as he removes all his clothes and becomes invisible. He even knocks out Jaffers as he tries to catch him. Haji Wells, born on September 21, 1856, Bromley, England, UK. He died on 13 August 1946. In 1895, Wells became an overnight literary sensation with the publication of the novel The Time Machine. The book was about an English scientist who develops a time travel machine. He published The Island of Dr. Moreau, The Invisible Man in 1897, The War of the Worlds in 1898. The Island of Dr. Moreau told the story of a man who encounters a scientist conducting the gruesome experiments on animals, creating new species of creatures. Actually, from here we can understand that he is known for his fictional writing, especially science fictional writer. H.G. Wells is known for his science fiction novels. Before we go into the lesson, we have to know the background of the lesson. Before we proceed, can a man become an invisible? This is a story of a scientist who discovers how to make himself invisible. Does he use or misuse his discovery? That's what about. Whether his discovery is a boon or curse for the society. Whether he is a good scientist too. Some of the key points have been discussed here. Griffin, a scientist, discovers a rare drug which can make a person invisible. His landlord dislikes him. Griffin wants to revenge on him. He swallows the drug and puts the house on fire. He puts off clothes, becomes invisible, and runs away. It was cold weather, and he felt the needed clothes. He sleeps inside a clothes store, had a meal, and slept night there. Okay, he didn't pay rent for his house owner or the landlord. That's was the reason he hates him. Finally, he sets a fire, and left the place. When he left the place, it was so cold, nail-biting cold at that time in the place where he became invisible. Even if he become invisible, he has all the traits like a human has. He is a human, but he becomes invisible. Just imagine that in the nail-biting cold season, if you are barefootedly, nakedly, you are walking on the street, but you are invisible, you can have all the feelings like human has. Is it possible for us to bear it? In that difficult situation, he became invisible. That's what the reason he needed clothes very much. So finally, he escaped from the place, and his invention became the good or bad. That's only going to be discussed here. The chair of the room becomes alive and forces Mr. and Mrs. Hall out of the room. Suddenly, Griffin appears from nowhere. When Mr. and Mrs. Hall inquire about the theft, Griffin gets angry. He removes the bandages and false nose. Now he was headless. The constable is called to arrest the headless man, but he is wounded by the invisible scientist. Actually, Mr. and Mrs. Hall went inside the room only to know whether he is inside or not, and what is he doing. That was the reason behind that. They enter into the room without the knowledge of him. Suddenly, Griffin appeared from nowhere. Actually, when they enter into the room, Griffin was nowhere. He was not there. But he appears from the room now. So he started, Mr. and Mrs. Hall started inquiring about the theft which had been happened in the Vicarate house. Actually, Griffin is the thief himself. But he gets angry when they started and demanding the explanation for all those things. And she is asking for the remittance which have not been paid to her still now. And finally, Griffin burst out into anger. He is enraged now. removes the bandages and false nose, and he is a headless man now. The constable came to arrest him, but he was too wounded by Griffin, the scientist who discovered the invisibility. So the constable is duty bonded. He wanted to arrest him anyhow, whether he has a head or not. It's not a matter for him. But so he said that whether he's a head or headless, I have to arrest him. He need to do his duty. That was the reason he came. But he was too wounded by Griffin, the scientist. Now let's look at the summary. Let's have a glance about the summary. Griffin, an eccentric scientist, discovered a rare drug. This could make a naked man invisible. He was not liked by his landlord. He decided to take a revenge on him. One day, he set his landlord's house on fire. Then he drank his rare drug and puts off his clothes. Now he could see everyone, but none could see him. He was safe from being caught. But he was without clothes and it was very cold. He passed the night in London store. He stole goods and money from the store. Then he went to the village called Epping. He stayed at an inn. He stole money from the clergyman's desk. A policeman named Jaffer was called, and strange fight took place in the Griffin took office. Okay, finally what happens is he is the scientist. He has been searching for a long to discover a medicine which could make a man invisible. He wanted to become an invisible man. That's what the reason he started doing all the experiments. One day he sets a fire to his landlord's house and escaped from the place because he never paid rent for the house, and he has been doing all the experiments in the house. When he went there, he just took along with him, he took some of his diaries and some other things, very important things which is required for his research, and he escaped from the place. Now he became invisible after he drank that rare drug which was found by him. When the landlord came, he just sets a fire of his experiments and everything, even the house too, and escaped from the place. Now he could see everyone, but none could see him. This was a very difficult situation there. Finally, it was very cold, as I said in the earlier, he was very cold. So he passed the night in the London, and whatever is needed for. When he was running out of money, he steals a clergyman's house, and the news spread like wildfire. Epping is a place for rumors. It's known for rumors. So he went there. That's what the reason news spread like a fire. And the clergyman's desk also is stolen the money. And the police came. Before the police came, Mr. and Mrs. Hall inquired about everything. He became invisible in front of them. He becomes headless in front of them. Okay, now the village constable Jaffer came to arrest him. Bandages his glass and his hat. Now he looked helpless. People were horrified. Griffin hit the policeman. He got free and ran away. First it was looked like Griffin is going to be surrendered in the fight. But when the time comes, he is invisible, as we all know that when the time comes, he make use of his invisibility to escape from Mr. Jaffer. Okay, the policeman couldn't arrest him. He attacked the policeman and escaped from there. Though, in story in brief, if you see that, two boys saw fresh footprints of an invisible man in the streets of London. These footprints were of a lawless scientist named Griffin. He discovered a rare drug which could make him invisible. His landlord disliked him and tried to reject him. In revenge, Griffin set fire to the house. He swallowed drug and removed his clothes to become invisible. He was, at a, he was a harmless wanderer until he happened to step in the somewhat and left footprints as he walked. He escaped easily enough from the boys who followed the footprints. Actually, he is invisible. The boys were stunned to see that how the footprints have come from nowhere. That's what the reason. It's the title is Footprints Without Feet. Without feet, footprints are appearing. He wandered in the streets of London. He faced cold weather and felt the need of clothes and food. He slept inside a big London store for warmth to make warm himself. He fitted himself out with warm clothes. Soon, with shoes, an overcoat, and wide-brimmed hat, he became fully dressed and visible person. In the kitchen of the restaurant, he enjoyed the meal. He fell asleep on the pile of coals. He woke up late in the morning. The store attendant gave him a chase, but he made him free by removing his clothes. Again, he is naked now. In the nail-biting cold, the weather is so cold at that time. Then he entered a theatrical company where he dressed up again and looted some money from the shopkeeper. Again, he went inside the theatrical company in search of the dress so that he can get something to cover his face. That's what the reason he went there. And finally, he looted some money. He just stole some money from there and escaped from the place. He wanted to live freely without any disturbance. So, he caught a train to Epping village and hired a room at the inn. The money of the loot did not last long, and he again had to rob clergy of his money. After some time, Mr. and Mrs. Hall visited his room. When they found the door of the room opened, they found nobody inside, but the chair and other things in the room became alive. The hat lying on the bedpost leapt up and dashed itself into the face of the lady. Then the bedroom chair became alive and it pushed the innkeeper and his wife out of the room. Mr. and Mrs. Hall almost fell down. The chair is in hysterics. She thought that it was a matter of witchcraft. She was convinced that the room was haunted by spirits and the stranger had somehow caused these to enter into her furniture. By the time the news of robbery spread and everybody suspected the scientist, the suspicious grew stronger when he produced ready cash, whereas he had accepted some time before that he had money. The village constable was sent for. Instead of waiting for the constable, Mrs. Hall went to the scientist, asked how he could came out of an empty room and how he entered a locked room. The eccentric scientist lost his temper when he faced the questions from Mrs. Hall. Mrs. Hall wanted to know. She demanded the money and everything. She demanded an explanation for everything he did. He threw off the bandages, spectacles, and false nose. This made him Again, the head invisible. When the constable, Mr. Jaffar, reached there, he saw that he had to arrest the headless man. He tries to get hold of him again, but Griffin outsmarted him by throwing away his clothes again. He became invisible and knocked down the constable out of his hands. The people who tried to help the constable receive the blows nowhere. Thus he again escaped from the scene and unnoticed again. Okay, now you can understand very clearly that his inventions are not good for the society. It's not the boon, it became the curse because of the